never thought I'd need to second-guess the person I trusted most in the world. I used to believe love meant handing over your heart, your secrets, your vulnerabilities, and knowing they'd be safe. But it turns out, giving someone that much trust means giving them the very tools they might use to destroy you. The first red flag wasn't a fight or an affair, it was something much quieter, buried in the background noise of life. I had gone in for a routine checkup at my clinic, nothing serious, just a follow-up for a prescription refill. I sat in the exam room, flipping through an outdated magazine, until the nurse pulled up my chart on her tablet. Her face flickered, just for a second, like something didn't add up. She smoothed it over quickly, but not before I caught it. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," she replied too quickly. "Just wanted to confirm a few things." She rattled off questions. Medications I supposedly wasn't taking anymore. Allergies listed that I didn't have. Even an appointment I'd supposedly missed weeks earlier. None of it was right. My stomach tightened as I corrected her, one by one, feeling like I was defending myself against my own medical records. When I got home, I brought it up with Marcus, my partner of 3 years. He was stretched out on the couch with his laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting in his glasses. He looked up casually, not at all concerned. "That's weird, Ampy," he said. "Probably just a clerical error? You know how sloppy those clinics can be." I wanted to believe him. After all, Marcus worked in IT for a hospital system. He knew the software better than anyone. If he said mistakes happened, I figured he'd know. But over the next few weeks, more little things piled up. A prescription wasn't refilled on time. A follow-up appointment showed in my chart as canceled when I never touched it. The nurse practitioner frowned when she asked why I hadn't been logging my glucose levels, except I had, religiously. It was like someone had gone in and rearranged the story of my body, line by line. The thought crept into my head one night when Marcus was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wasn't the type to snoop, but after weeks of feeling gaslit by my own medical history, curiosity twisted into necessity. I opened his phone. There it was. An app, one I recognized instantly, the same portal I used for my clinic. Except this wasn't my account. It was mine through his login. He had access. He'd been inside my records. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone. When he came out of the bathroom, steam curling around him, I pretended to be asleep. But inside, I wasn't just awake, I was on fire. The next morning, I tested him. Over breakfast, I casually mentioned how weird it was that my allergy list suddenly included penicillin. Marcus didn't even blink. "You should tell them to fix that," he said. But his tone was too smooth, too rehearsed. Like he'd expected me to notice. Why would he add an allergy I didn't have? The paranoia took root. I couldn't shake the image of him at his computer late at night, logged into my account, editing details with a few keystrokes. But the question gnawed at me. Why? Why would the man who held me at night, who whispered that I was his whole world, want to rewrite my medical history? One night, I decided to find out. I waited until Marcus fell asleep, his breathing slow and steady beside me. I slipped out of bed, padded into the living room, and pulled open his laptop. My pulse hammered in my ears as I navigated to the portal. And there it was. My file, my name, my blood work, my prescriptions, my notes. Edited again and again. Each change logged under an administrative access code I recognized from his job. But it wasn't random. He wasn't just messing around, he was crafting something. There was a pattern. Old allergies added, then deleted. Medication refills canceled, then reinstated. Notes about compliance issues. With insulin, even though I never missed a dose. It read like a breadcrumb trail leading somewhere. A narrative Marcus was carefully building about me. The deeper I dug, the sicker I felt. He wasn't just tampering, he was rewriting me into a version of myself that didn't exist. A version who was careless, unstable, non-compliant with treatment. I snapped the laptop shut when the bedroom door creaked. Marcus stood there, watching me. His expression was unreadable in the half-light, but his voice was soft. Too soft. "Couldn't sleep?" My mouth was dry. I forced a smile. "Just checking emails." He nodded, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. He knew. He always knew when I was lying. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him editing my life away, one keystroke at a time. And for the first time since we'd met, I wasn't sure I knew who Marcus really was. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I got a call from the clinic. A woman's voice, flat and professional, told me I'd been flagged for non-compliance with treatment. They wanted to discuss possible discharge from their care network. My throat went tight. Discharge? For what? I showed up to the meeting with printouts of my logs, my glucometer, my prescription receipts. But the doctor slid a file across the desk. My file. Except it wasn't mine anymore. According to the records, I'd missed 3 appointments I never even scheduled, refused insulin therapy twice, and reported side effects that I'd never mentioned. The notes painted me as reckless, negligent, even dangerous to myself. The worst part? There were signatures. My signatures. Perfect copies, at the bottom of false forms. Someone had forged my consent. I left the clinic in a haze, clutching papers that didn't belong to me but carried my name. I sat in my car shaking, the weight of it crushing me. There was only one person who had the access, the skill, and the motive, Marcus. But the motive, I still couldn't see it. What did he gain by making me look like I was falling apart? And that night, I confronted him. I spread the papers on the table, my voice shaking with fury. What is this, Marcus? Why is my life a fiction now? He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. He just leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers like he'd been waiting for this. Because, he said calmly, sometimes people need saving from themselves, even if they don't see it yet. His words chilled me more than any denial could have. Because in that moment, I realized Marcus didn't think he was destroying me. He thought he was saving me. And that was so much worse. Marcus's words echoed in my head for days. Sometimes people need saving from themselves. I couldn't make sense of it. Saving me? From what? I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't reckless. I'd been careful, methodical with my health since the day I was diagnosed. My routines were solid, my checkups always consistent. If anything, I was the boring one. The person who lived by alarms and glucose readings. But Marcus didn't see it that way. The morning after the confrontation, he acted like nothing had happened. He kissed me on the forehead, poured my coffee, and asked if I wanted toast. I stared at him, trying to read the truth in the way he buttered the bread. My hands trembled as I took the mug. He didn't mention the forged papers, the fake signatures, the records rewritten like a story he wanted to tell. It was like he'd reset himself. Like we hadn't fought at all. I thought about leaving, packing a bag and walking out, but where would I go? My parents lived 2 states away, and I didn't want to drag them into this. My friends, well, most of them were Marcus's friends first. He'd woven himself into every part of my life. Besides, I couldn't just leave without answers. I needed to know what his endgame was. So I stayed. But I started watching him differently. The late nights at his laptop. The phone calls he stepped outside to take. The way he always knew when my next appointment was. Sometimes before I did. One night, I woke up thirsty and found him in the living room, lit only by the blue glow of the screen. His fingers flew over the keyboard, his face calm, focused. I crept closer, heart hammering. On the screen was my chart, again. But this time, he wasn't just editing, he was downloading. My entire medical history, from childhood to now, was being exported into a file. I gasped before I could stop myself. Marcus spun around, eyes wide, then narrowed. What are you doing up? What the hell are you doing? I shot back, my voice breaking. He hesitated, then closed the laptop slowly. Backing things up, he said, in case the clinic loses anything. Don't lie to me. My fist clenched. Why do you need my records? What are you planning? He stood, towering over me, his face unreadable. You wouldn't understand. Make me understand. His jaw worked. For a long moment, I thought he'd walk away. But then he whispered, almost to himself, they need to see it. Everyone needs to see it. See what? That you're not okay. My blood went cold. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. You think you're fine because you follow the rules. But you don't see what I see. You don't see the late nights where you almost miss a dose. You don't see how tired you are. How much you've slipped since we met. You're drowning, and you don't even notice. But I notice. And when I show them the truth, they'll have to intervene. Intervene? My voice cracked. I'm protecting you, he insisted. If they believe you're unstable, they'll step in. You'll have constant care. No more mistakes. No more risks. Just safety. I stumbled back, nausea twisting in my gut. You want them to think I can't take care of myself. His silence was the answer. I barely slept that night. The apartment felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Every glance from Marcus felt like surveillance. I checked my phone obsessively, half expecting to see notifications from the clinic telling me I'd been dropped from care entirely. 2 days later, it happened. I showed up to my appointment only to be told I was no longer eligible for the clinical trial I'd been participating in, a study that had given me access to cutting-edge medication at reduced cost. Non-compliance, the coordinator said, her voice apologetic but firm. The records show multiple violations. I'm sorry, but the sponsors won't allow exceptions. I begged. I showed my logs, my glucometer, every shred of evidence I had. But the paperwork, Marcus's paperwork, outweighed me. I left in tears, my body shaking with fury. That night, I confronted him again, slamming the denial letter onto the table. You did this. You're sabotaging my treatment. Marcus looked at the letter, then at me. His expression softened like I was a child throwing a tantrum. It's better this way, he said. Those trials are risky. Too many unknowns. You'll thank me one day. Thank you? I screamed. For destroying the only thing that could make my life easier? He didn't flinch. For keeping you safe. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to claw that calm expression off his face. But instead, I locked myself in the bathroom and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. That was when I realized this wasn't just about control. Marcus had built a reality in his head where I was fragile, broken, incapable of survival without him. And he was determined to make everyone else believe it too. And worse, the system was on his side. Over the next weeks, the walls closed in. Prescriptions delayed, insurance claims denied. Doctors treating me with suspicion. like I was a liar or an addict. Each interaction chipped away at my credibility. And Marcus? He was always there, ready to comfort me, to hold me, to whisper that he'd take care of everything. I began to wonder if he wanted me to depend on him entirely, if he needed me to. The breaking point came when I found a letter in the mail. Not from the clinic this time, but from my insurance company. They were reviewing my case due to inconsistencies in medical history. Benefits could be suspended. I stared at the letter until the words blurred. If I lost coverage, I'd lose access to everything. Insulin, supplies, doctor visits, all gone. I confronted Marcus again, my voice raw. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? He didn't answer right away. He just watched me, his eyes dark, unreadable. Finally, he said, I want you to need me, completely, forever. The air left my lungs. This wasn't about saving me. It was about owning me. And in that moment, I knew. If I didn't stop him, he'd succeed. He'd erase me, one line of data at a time, until the only version of me that existed was the one he created. But I also knew this. If he was clever enough to rewrite my records, maybe I could rewrite the story too. The moment Marcus said it, I want you to need me, completely, forever. Something inside me broke. Not just fear, not just anger, something deeper. A realization that the man I'd shared a bed with, trusted with my secrets, leaned on in my weakest moments, wasn't a partner. He was a captor who didn't need chains. His chains were digital, invisible, far more dangerous. Because while bruises fade, paper trails don't. I knew I couldn't fight him head on. He had access, skills, and a calmness that terrified me. He could outmaneuver me in every system I relied on. If I challenged him directly, he'd just bury me deeper under his fabricated history. So I played along. For weeks, I smiled when he kissed me. I let him hover over my shoulder when I checked my blood sugar. I even thanked him when he drove me to appointments I didn't trust anymore. I played the role of the fragile, dependent partner he wanted me to be. But underneath, I planned. The first step was proof. Not just suspicion, proof that Marcus was the one rewriting me. But how do you prove a digital crime when the criminal works in the very system designed to protect records? I started small. Screen recordings on my phone when I logged into my chart. I noted every discrepancy, every sudden change. I hid copies of my logs in cloud storage he didn't know about. I even filmed myself filling prescriptions and logging doses, a paper trail he couldn't erase. The more evidence I gathered, the more suffocated I felt. Because every log, every screenshot, every whispered recording in the bathroom proved the same truth. Marcus was dismantling me in real time. But the why still haunted me. One night, when he was out on a late shift, I searched his office. Drawers, folders, USB drives hidden in fake soda cans. That's when I found it, a file labeled with my name. I clicked it open, and my blood turned to ice. Inside were hundreds of documents. Altered versions of my charts, yes, but also essays. Pages and pages written in Marcus's voice, analyzing me like a case study. Patient demonstrates poor compliance despite outward appearances. Subject unaware of her declining stability. Recommended course, conservatorship. Conservatorship. The word slammed into me like a blow. He wasn't just trying to make me dependent on him. He was building a case to make it legal. To strip me of control over my own medical decisions, my own finances, my own life. And in a twisted way, it made sense. If the records painted me as unstable, if the system saw me as a danger to myself, Marcus could petition for guardianship. He'd become my legal keeper. I wouldn't just live with him, I'd live under him, forever. I dropped the USB back into its hiding place before my shaking hands betrayed me. That night, I lay awake beside him, his arm draped over me like a shackle, and realized, if I didn't act soon, I'd lose more than my records. I'd lose myself. The next morning, I made my move. I called the clinic, not from my phone, but from a payphone 3 blocks away, my voice disguised as best I could. I asked to speak to the compliance officer. I told them there was a breach, that someone inside was altering patient records, that I had evidence. They brushed me off at first, but when I dropped Marcus's name and job title, there was a pause, a nervous shuffle, a promise to escalate. That was the crack in the wall I needed. The following week, I walked into my appointment armed with everything I'd gathered. Screenshots, recordings, hidden logs. I handed them to the doctor with trembling hands and begged him to compare them against the official file. He frowned, his eyes flicking between the records. These don't match. Relief and terror collided in my chest, because now it was real. It wasn't just me knowing anymore. Someone else had seen the fracture. The investigation moved fast after that, too fast. Marcus noticed the shift in tone at the clinic, the cautious questions, the sudden restriction of his access at work. His calm exterior cracked. One night, he cornered me in the kitchen, his voice low, trembling with rage. You told them. I didn't answer. You ruined everything, he hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stand tall. I saved myself. His eyes darkened, and for the first time, I thought he might actually hit me. His hand twitched like he was fighting the urge. But instead, he stepped back, his mouth curling into a bitter smile. You think you've won? He whispered. You think they'll believe you over me? I've been rewriting you for months. You're already unstable in their eyes. You're already halfway to being mine. And then he walked out. 2 days later, I came home to find his office empty. The USB drives, the files, the laptop, all gone. He'd vanished. The clinic confirmed he'd been terminated, pending investigation. But that didn't comfort me, because I knew Marcus. He wasn't the type to give up. He was the type to regroup, to wait. Weeks passed. My insurance was reinstated. My trial slot was reopened. The clinic issued apologies, calling it an internal breach. They never said his name, but I saw the shame in their eyes. My parents came to stay for a while, filling the apartment with noise and casseroles. For the first time in months, I felt safe enough to sleep through the night, until the letter arrived. No return address. Just my name on the envelope, written in handwriting I knew as well as my own. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You can fix the records, you can rebuild your life, but you'll never erase the truth. I'm the only one who knows who you really are. And one day, you'll need me again. No signature. Just a copy of my medical chart. The forged version. The one where I was reckless, unstable, broken. The sound of my own pulse roared in my ears. Because even if Marcus was gone, his version of me was still out there. And I had no way of knowing when or how he'd use it next. The letter stayed hidden in my drawer for weeks. I couldn't bring myself to destroy it, but I couldn't bear to look at it either. Every time I thought about throwing it in the shredder, I imagined Marcus laughing, knowing I still carried his ghost with me. I told myself he was gone. Fired. Disgraced. Probably hiding in some cheap apartment, nursing his bitterness. But deep down, I knew better. Marcus wasn't the kind of man to fade quietly into the background. He was the kind who planted seeds and waited. And the forged chart he left me was proof that the roots of his obsession still ran deep. I thought maybe, with enough time, I'd forget. That the trauma would dull and life would crawl back to normal. But it didn't. The first sign came 3 months later. I was at work, balancing invoices, when an email landed in my inbox. No subject line, no sender name I recognized. Just a PDF attachment. Against my better judgment, I clicked. It was my chart again. The forged one. But this time, it wasn't just sitting there. Someone had submitted it. The header bore the seal of the local courthouse. A petition. A guardianship petition. Filed under my name. And Marcus was listed as concerned party. I froze in my chair, my coworkers' voices fading to a muffled blur. He'd done it. He'd gone through with the plan. The next weeks were a blur of court notices, lawyer consultations, frantic phone calls to my parents. My savings drained into retainer fees. Every time I thought about stepping into that courtroom, my chest tightened, as if Marcus's hands were still wrapped around me. The hearing day came. The courthouse smelled of old wood and fear. My lawyer whispered strategy, but I barely heard him. Because across the aisle, in a cheap gray suit, sat Marcus. Calm, polished, smiling like he'd already won. When the judge called his name, he spoke with smooth authority. He painted me as unstable, negligent, a danger to myself. He cited irregularities in my logs, erratic behavior, missed appointments, all fabrications he'd planted months ago. And then, he produced the forged chart, the same one I'd found in his office, the same one he'd mailed me. Clean. Official looking. Poison in paper form. I thought I'd break apart right there. But then it was my turn. My lawyer handed over my evidence. The recordings, the screenshots, the notes I'd hidden away. The compliance officer from the clinic testified, confirming Marcus had altered records. My doctor spoke, voice steady, explaining how my actual logs contradicted his narrative. Piece by piece, the walls Marcus built began to crack. Still, his eyes never left me. Not once. They burned into me, as if to say, even if I lose here, you'll never escape me. The judge recessed for lunch. I found myself in the restroom, gripping the sink until my knuckles turned white. My reflection looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed, trembling. And then, from the stall behind me, a voice whispered, "You'll never win without me." I spun, heart in my throat. The stall door creaked open. Empty. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the tiles. Had I imagined it, or had Marcus actually followed me? The afternoon dragged on. When the verdict finally came, it was clear. The guardianship was denied. The petition was dismissed, with prejudice, meaning he couldn't file again. Relief should have washed over me. But instead, dread settled in. Because Marcus didn't look defeated. He looked amused. Like he'd planned for this. 2 weeks later, my employer called me into HR. "Your background check raised some concerns," they said carefully. Confused, I asked what they meant. They slid a folder across the table. Inside was a copy of, you guessed it, the forged chart. He'd sent it to them. My workplace. He wanted me branded unreliable, unemployable. I begged them to believe me, to look deeper. Some did, some didn't. In the end, I kept my job, but my reputation wasn't untouched. Whispers spread. Stares lingered. And I knew this was just the beginning. Marcus wasn't trying to control me anymore. He was trying to erase me. The police said their hands were tied. It's harassment, they agreed. But unless he violates the restraining order physically, our options are limited. Limited. The word echoed in my skull like a death sentence. Everywhere I turned, Marcus's shadow followed. Anonymous calls in the night. My prescriptions mysteriously delayed. A neighbor mentioning they'd seen a man sitting in a car outside my building, engine running, headlights off. I stopped sleeping, stopped trusting anyone. Until one night, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside, a small black notebook. My name embossed on the cover. I opened it with shaking hands. Every page was filled. Dates, times, observations, my life, tracked in Marcus's meticulous handwriting. What time I woke up, when I left for work, how long I spent at the grocery store, even private moments, like crying in the shower, somehow captured. At the very end, one line stood out in bold letters. I don't need the system to own you anymore. I already do. I dropped the notebook like it was burning me. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. Marcus didn't need guardianship papers or forged charts to control me. He had something stronger. He had me living in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder. And as long as I lived like that, I was still his prisoner. The question is, how do you fight someone who's rewritten not just your records, but your reality? Because even now, as I write this, I don't know if the sound I hear outside my window is just traffic, or if Marcus is out there, waiting.